probably get started. I want to first say thank you for taking the time to do this today. I appreciate it. You know, we've been having a lot of fun meeting with our some of our founding members of Club dVIN, and using that as an opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing with the club and kind of where we're headed, but also to kind of get to know our founding members a little bit more, with in this kind of a forum. So I'll introduce myself in a minute, but do you want to start by just kind of letting people know who you are, what your background is, and where you're and what you're up to these days?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. And my pleasure. Thanks very much for the opportunity. My name is John Jackson, and I'm an attorney based in Dallas, Texas, but I'm also a recipient of a level 4 diploma. And before that, obtained levels 1, 2, and 3 certification from the WSET. I've been into wine collecting for a number of years, and then started out doing the WSET programs to become a better blind wine taster, since that's pretty difficult. And I wasn't getting too many bragging rights in the tests I was doing before. So I wanted to work on that, and then kind of got the bug and just kept on going. And so a couple of years ago, I was looking for a kind of a creative outlet for my legal work when I was doing a lot of travel for depositions and such. And so I ended up starting an Instagram blog about wine and some of the wines that I would pair with dinners when I was on a business trip. And that ultimately led to the page doing much better than I expected. And now it's over 18,400 followers. And then I started a YouTube channel about 1.5 years ago, and now that's over 2,000, almost at 2,000 subscribers. So I focus mostly on wine collecting content and strategies, and then also on reviews of collectible wines. So that's kind of my focus.
And I got to tell you, that's what really attracted you to us. That's how I got to know you, just following you on Instagram a couple of years ago. And I've been following you for a long time. Love the posts, love the kind of a look into the life of a collector. I mean, I think that you do it really authentically, and that's what makes it really kind of fun and interesting for me. And I didn't, it's funny until, and I'm probably because I didn't look closely enough, but until you and I started talking, I didn't realize that you had the YouTube channel. And I don't spend a lot of time on YouTube, but then when I went and checked it out, really great stuff. Like we really liked the content, really liked the education, and thought that it's really nice to see, to have it be so down to earth, but like also just such a, I don't know, just such a really great outlet for you. So I'm, kudos on all of your success with social media. And that's one of the things that we want to talk about today.
Yeah, thanks very much. And yeah, definitely as I was going through the 2 years for the level 4 diploma, one of the things I found is that posting about what I was learning helped to reinforce it as well. And so I tried to help teach other people some of the same things that I was learning.
We have a couple of new diploma holders that are all other founding members and also kind of on the team here helping us out. Janet Creelan, who's our head of content, and Valentina Littman, who's our head of community, and both just fantastic people, super knowledgeable, both obviously pretty active on Instagram as well. And I've been really working hard to they both just got their diplomas on Tuesday, or last week, maybe it was last Monday, but they were in London, in Vintners Hall. They got their diplomas, and we were all very proud of them both kind of doing that together. Knowing how hard the work is. Can you talk a little bit about what it takes to be a diploma holder? And
Sure.
like what you shared with your community while you did that?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, and I received my certificate, but I think they're going to make me wait a year before I go through the ceremony for whatever reason. I think just kind of a timing issue, depending on when
That's a bummer.
Yeah, but it'll be a fun trip next year too. But it's a 2-year program, and there's 6 units. And so they're kind of divided up. The first 2 units are prerequisites. One is all about vinification and grape growing. And so that's about 20% of the weighting. And so you have to do kind of a deep dive into those areas and learn a lot about chemistry and other things that I didn't know so much about. And so that was a big learning curve for me. And then
Sure.
unit 2 is all about business and marketing and the different stakeholders involved in the wine industry and how you go about bottling and things of that nature. And so once you pass those 2 units, then you get into the what most people assume you'll be studying, which is all the wines of the world. And then there's 3 different units for that, one on sparkling wine, one on fortified wine, and then one on still wine, which is about 50% of the weighting. And that's about 30 chapters long and 600 pages. And that's what everyone kind of calls the beast, because the exam is 2 full days and you have about 3 hours worth of essays and 3 hours of blind tasting of 12 wines that you need to get through. And then there's a research paper as well.
What did you do your research paper on?
Mine was on natural wine. So they have a topic that comes out every 6 months. And based on timing, they had canceled my fortified wine class because of the pandemic. And so I had a gap in the schedule. So I went ahead and knocked out the paper at that time.
Great. Wow. Cool. Well, I'd love to read it when you get a chance. I'm always a big fan of, it's hard to make those research papers like sing as much as the social media, but I'd love to read what you put together. That's great. I was saying that I've been talking to Jana and Valentina, asking them now that they have their diploma, like when are they ready to get started on the Master of Wine program? And it's interesting that you say that you had that you kind of, did parts of your diploma sort of with your or showing it to your fans on Instagram or your audience on YouTube. Would you recommend that for them to do for the MW? And are you planning to do the MW program as well?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about doing the application for the MW program. I know it's going to open up in the next couple of weeks, so I'm kind of looking it over and pulling some information together just in case. One of the reasons I did the social media as well is there's a work experience requirement. You need 3 years of industry work experience. And so, a lot of the social media consulting that I do and some of the other work that I do on social media could potentially satisfy that work requirement. I know someone else who's in the program who satisfied it through those steps. So that was kind of one of the reasons for it as well. But I think it's probably something that may be useful for them. It's certainly been useful for me. Definitely the YouTube videos, you can go into much more depth. There's a character limitation on Instagram that frequently frustrated me. So I had to be real concise and sometimes do things in multiple parts. But I found it helpful to teach other people. It helps me reinforce what I'm learning for sure.
Wait a minute. So you're saying the character limit on Instagram frustrated you as a lawyer writing about wine? It's weird because most lawyers I know, are very concise with their writing.
Yeah, I oftentimes would try to post it and get cut off. And even typically how I do it is I'll write it in my Outlook notes first, and then I'll copy and paste it there. And half the time it doesn't come close to getting everything in there. So I have to redo it.
Doesn't fit. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Instagram and social media, because there's some kind of interesting parallels with what we're doing. If you can, why don't you talk for a minute about kind of how what your kind of Instagram strategy is, or what you do on Instagram with social media. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what we're doing at Club dVIN and tell you about kind of what we see actually as an interesting parallel or even integration with Instagram. But can you talk a little bit about kind of how Instagram, how what you did on Instagram, and how your kind of the feedback you got there, or the social media kind of affects your wine life?
Sure, and it's kind of evolved over the years. I started maybe 3 years ago and was initially kind of posting some trophy wines or occasional like nice meals from well-known restaurants, things of that nature. But very quickly, I started figuring things out a little bit, and then doing kind of the long form captions before they were really popular, where it was more like a blog or what you would see in an article. And people enjoyed that, and that was well received, and those posts did well. More recently, and I would typically do that every third day. So every third day, I would do a static post. Of course, more recently, video has been a big focus. Once the pandemic hit, I had a number of winemakers and producers reach out to me about doing Instagram lives. And so I did probably 25 or 30 sessions so far with winemakers or CEOs of prominent companies, Tempos Vegas, Sicilia, a number of companies like that, a lot of the champagne producers, and La Rioja Alta, for example. And so I did a lot of those where we would do a virtual tasting, and then I would also ask them about their grape growing and winemaking practices and some other questions. And those were pretty well received. They've slowed down a little bit, but I'll still do them every couple months. And in addition, more recently, to emphasize video, I've started doing a lot more reels. And so the captions aren't quite as long, and they're oftentimes also focused on collectible wine reviews. But instead of doing it with a static caption or a static image, I'll do it in a reel format. So there might be a video of the wine bottles or more of a slide deck of the wine bottles. And then I'll pick some sort of a song to go with it and then package it that way. And I think now people are starting to realize that my captions are there too, where before I think there was a bit of a learning curve and a lot of people were either confused or thought that I wasn't writing about them anymore.
Oh, that's funny. Well, that's really interesting. So what kind of response do you get from what are the posts that you do that you think get the best response from your audience on Instagram, at least?
Yeah, definitely Bordeaux, and first growth Bordeaux in particular has always been probably the most well-received type of content. And that's been true probably from beginning until now.
Really? And why do you think that is?
I don't know. It just seems like either it's the people who follow me or just because Bordeaux is just so popular. I've always noticed that whenever I post about Bordeaux, it typically does well. There's some other things too that could be some outliers, but in terms of if I would just pick one type of wine that I could post about that would do the best, it would be first growth Bordeaux for sure.
Interesting.
There's some others that are close. Italian wine does pretty well, and especially lately, the combination of Italian wine on reels seems to be very effective. And so I'm not sure if Italian wine aficionados just enjoy reels more than those who like Bordeaux, but that's something I've noticed probably the last month, where the Italian wines have been doing actually very, very well on reels.
You know, my wife is a professional photographer and has done a lot of work with winemakers and vineyards. She published a book, the Winemakers of Paso Robles, a few years ago. And I've done a little bit of television work. I'm I'm executive producing a series that's coming out next year, and we've been working on a couple of different pieces for television. And what we always say is that the wineries, it's very nice of the wineries to spend generations and millions of dollars building our sets for us. So I imagine you kind of have the same experience, right? Like they don't make wine in ugly places, as it turns out. So that's got to be really good for your content.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of what I do too is I'm a big fan of wine travel, as you might imagine. And so 3 to 5 times a year, hopefully I visit various wine producing regions, and then I'll always do videos and content from my travels as well.
And this is an aside, but did I hear correctly that you're going to be in Barcelona in the next couple of weeks?
In the first half of June, I'll be in Spain. Yes. In Barcelona, some parts, Priorat, and then Rioja.
Well, so I'm in Barcelona, so we should, I heard that through a third party, but let's get together when you're here. We'll take Definitely. It offline. But I'm looking forward to that. So one of the things, as part of the Instagram conversation, I've had some some pretty interesting conversations recently with actually a senior executive from Meta, talking about what Instagram is going to start looking like with what their NFT strategy is. It was a really interesting conversation because we talked about how that's going to work, what that means, what they're trying to do, and he was very, very bullish on how the project works. And really, what he told me is you'll be able to connect your wallet to Instagram in the same way that you would connect it to OpenSea or Rarible. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it's a crypto wallet or a Web3 wallet like MetaMask or Taurus is one that we use a lot. That's where you store both your cryptocurrency and your NFTs. MetaMask is probably the most common out there. I think they've got 10 or 20 million users at this point. And the wallet is really interesting because it stores, it's a store of value, right? It stores your Bitcoin or Ethereum, it stores your NFTs. It also stores your personal information, which is kind of interesting. When we were building out the Club dVIN site, it was a very interesting concept that you would, in order to log in, you would log in with your wallet. And in order to, update your personal information, you would actually ask your wallet to provide that personal information to the site. And it's just different from like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or anything like that, because with Web3 you own your personal information, not Instagram or Facebook. But what he was saying was that you can connect your wallet you'll be able to connect your wallet to Instagram. You'll be able to do what you can do on Twitter now, which is make your NFT your profile pic, and that'll be like a verified NFT. So I don't know if anyone's ever seen that, but it's pretty cool. I've done it with my Twitter account. But you'll also be able to create galleries based on collections, and that's particularly interesting to us just because of what our sort of NFT strategy is. And I should probably back up a little bit and kind of tell people a little bit more about who we are and what we're doing. And so let me just start off with that. I'm Dave Garrett. I'm one of the co-founders of Club dVIN. We're an NFT membership club that's similar to some of the other clubs that you've seen out there, the Bored Ape or the Flyfish or Links DAO or Proof Collective. We're just based on wine, and we've recruited a bunch of really great founding members like John to kind of help us shape the community and figure out what we're going to do. We'll have more webinars with more information on the club later on, but today what I wanted to talk about was our digital cork and tasting tokens, because that really kind of fits in with Instagram. So the digital cork is that's really the technology that we've built Club dVIN on, right? It's the digital twin for your collectible wine bottle. And that digital twin does a bunch of different things. It's the deed of ownership, it's the certificate of authenticity, it provides chain of custody. So if you share that bottle, you know who's owned it before you. It's kind of neat because it sends a royalty back to the winemaker if it's traded in the aftermarket. So that's pretty cool. We think that the winemakers really like that. But we kind of get caught up talking about all of the utility of the digital cork, and sometimes we forget to talk about the creative. And what's really interesting, and I'm gonna show off a little bit of that in a minute, but we've started really playing around with a lot of different ideas for how the digital cork can be designed and how the digital cork, like what that looks like. And what we're doing right now are these sort of 12-second videos that kind of tell the story of that wine. We're doing them right now, but in the future, the idea is for the winery to be able to design them themselves and to use their own language and their own brand and their own storytelling and their own creativity to tell that story in the video or the creative that we're using. Um, what's also really interesting about our platform is when you open the bottle, if that bottle is in your wallet, you can pull the digital cork. And when you pull the digital cork, that will allow you as the owner of that bottle to make tasting tokens. And what I always say when I talk about tasting tokens is that tasting tokens are like the Web3 equivalent of taking a picture of the label and posting it to Instagram, right? It's like that, but it's cooler because A, it's got kind of neat visuals, and B, it's got all the metadata already in there, so you don't have to type in the name of the wine or anything like that, and it puts the timestamp and the date stamp. So the idea is it's this proof of experience, and we can talk about the utility of it later, but it's really interesting to be able to collect and share these kind of beautiful stories about the notable wines that you're drinking. I'm just gonna share my screen real quick and show you a couple of examples. Hey Sarah, can you make that? Can you make it? Give me the ability to share the screen. I'm gonna ping her on that. Let me ping her on that, and then I'm gonna get back and talk about. Hold on one second.
Yeah, for those who are familiar with Seller Tracker, I kind of envision it as having some of the Seller Tracker information as well. So kind of a hybrid maybe, but with additional functionality for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the functionality is really great. And one of the things, so we've been talking about kind of working with the winemakers to make the NFTs, and there's a really kind of interesting little piece that we just thought about the other day, which is, the distance between most winemakers and wine consumers is like 15 years and 15,000 miles, right? Like it's a far away land. Like typically when you're opening a great bottle of Bordeaux, it was made 15 years ago. So creating the NFTs and making, recording these little videos ends up being pretty interesting for almost like a time capsule, right? So the winemaker can create the video and can create the NFT, and then 15 years later someone's opening that bottle, and then you can see the video, and it's like transports you back to the time when that wine was made. And so let me just show you a little bit about what we're doing. And I'm showing you kind of a public website. These are NFTs that we've already launched, tasting tokens that we've done for different events. This one we made for the NFT LA event that we did last year. Let me just reload this. Or I'm sorry, that we did last month in LA. And the concept of it is we took, sorry, it's just loading a little bit slowly here. But I'm not sure why it's not showing up. I wonder if that's a Zoom thing. Are you able to see, John, are you able to see the different videos?
Yes.
So they're all coming through? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So most of these are tasting tokens that we created for different events. This one is actually kind of interesting because you can kind of see that it starts off with a vineyard and then it goes to actually an event. That's me right there. So part of the idea that we have for tasting tokens is that the first 3 beats or the first 12 seconds of the tasting token are created by the vineyard. But then when you open the bottle, you can take a video that you shoot during your event where you're opening the bottle, or with your friends, and you can append that to the end. So it ends up being your memory of the event, and that's just appended to the end. And so imagine being able to, open your Instagram and see a gallery of all of the great wines that you've tasted, or the great wines that you've tasted recently, because obviously the program's just starting. But being able to see that gallery, and then with the digital corks, you'll see a gallery of the wines that are in your virtual cellar. So we're just excited about it. Obviously, it's very, very early days, but we think it just provides a really interesting way for people to be able to kind of think about how to use their NFTs in their, even just starting now. That's kind of the first vestiges of the metaverse, is really Instagram being able to let you show off your NFT collection.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just talked for a long time.
Did they give you any information about timing or time frame when they might start rolling that out, at least in beta form?
They said about 3 months.
Okay, so pretty fast then.
Yeah, pretty fast. I don't know why. Oh, here we go. There, it's showing up a little bigger there. So this is Chateau Pavie, and these are all videos from Chateau Pavie for this particular wine. And again, this is really just an example of what this could look like. The idea, the blue check mark, means that it came directly from the winery. We're looking at having different check marks for different, if for example the wine comes from a famous collection, or from Sotheby's, or from some other authenticator, we'd have a different authentication here. Obviously, you see here we got the time and the date stamp. We show a little bit about the wine, and then over here we've got the details for the event, and some of the details from the origin. And we're working on having more and more of that, more metadata, more a little bit more storytelling. But for right now, as kind of an alpha test, this is our first idea of what this could look like. This is an event we did last week for Paris Blockchain, and we opened some Chateau Yquem, and this is just one of my favorite pieces that we've done. Very simple, very easy. One of the other kind of interesting aspects is you can see here. Now these are all just wallet addresses. If I can look at some other. If I find some other tasting tokens, you can kind of see, this is one of the first ones that we did back in New York. Yeah, let's look at this. No, it's the same way. But some of the other tasting tokens that we've done, like this one was from an event that we did in New York for La Palais, and you can see, like, I claimed my Rarible page. So you can start to see how, as these people start to understand how it works and they start to claim their page, I can see all of the people that I tasted this wine with. And that starts to have like kind of a really interesting social experience. I'd love to get your feedback on that, and maybe advice on how we can make it better.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think it's certainly something that'd be very interesting. It's somewhat analogous to the close friends feature on Instagram now, where they have various things that are accessible only to your closer friends, and
Sure.
they'll show the green circle on the profile picture for those people. But this is sort of the same thing, where you can share experiences with these wines with the people that you know well and would enjoy interacting with. So I think that's a pretty interesting application for sure.
Yeah, I think it's cool. It's going to be really interesting and fun to see how it works, especially when Instagram launches that feature. What we're hoping is that all of our members, the people that are Club dVIN members are kind of early adopters for this kind of technology, both in wine and in NFTs. And our plan is to make sure that everyone's kind of fully stocked on tasting tokens and digital corks by the time that feature gets rolled out by Instagram, so you can all brag to your friends, or what do they say? You can all flex to your friends that that you've got the cool NFTs. All
For
right.
wine collectors, maybe you could elaborate a little bit on the ability to track the provenance of a bottle from inception to purchase. I think that's one of the most interesting aspects for wine collectors.
Sure. So, most of the collectible and investment grade wineries today are already attaching some sort of unique identifier to every bottle. Sometimes that's a QR code, sometimes it's an NFC sticker, that's the same technology that's kind of in your credit card. Lynch Bage just engraves the serial number on every bottle individually, which is kind of interesting. But as long as there's a unique identifier on the bottle, we can link that bottle to an NFT on the blockchain, right? And from our perspective, it starts really with that wine starts at the winery, and we can track provenance. So an NFT works the same way as kind of like the deed to your house or the land registry, where when you sell one NFT to somebody else, it's not like they erase your name and write in somebody else's, they append your name, right? So every time there's a sale, there's a new owner, and they log the date and the time of that transaction. So, and that's all immutable. It's all on the blockchain forever. Can't be erased, can't be changed, can't be forged. So when you buy a bottle in the future that has a digital cork attached, you'll be able to see everybody that owned that bottle before you. You'll be able to see every transaction. You'll be able to see the date of the transaction. And in the future, one of the things that we can add to that is even information like how is the wine transported, or how is it stored? Even linking to technology that will tell us, exactly what the climate conditions were for, its shipping across the ocean, or exactly what the climate conditions were for the bonded warehouse. And what's interesting about that is, in the kind of short term, sort of obviously, it's going to disincentivize fraud and counterfeit, right? Like if you can see who owned that bottle before you, no one's certainly it's going to be difficult to do at any scale. And it's also kind of hard. Like you're going to get caught. Eventually you're going to get caught if you're trying to like pull off some shady stuff. But over time, what's really going to happen, I think what's really going to especially with great adoption and significant transparency, what's going to happen more than anything else is you're going to have a real incentive to have clean provenance. So for example, right now, if there's two bottles out there of the 2002 Pavie that are both the same vintage, same bottle, came from the same bottling, they're going to have more or less the same price in the open market. But if you could look at those two bottles and say, okay, one of them has had 6 owners in 3 countries around the world in the last 15 years, and the other one sat in a bonded warehouse for 15 years, there's going to be a price differential. And that price differential is going to start obviously favoring the bottle that sits in the bonded warehouse for 15 years. So as that happens, people that are interested in reselling their bottles are going to 10s are going to be incentivized to have cleaner provenance, which over time we think is just going to it's going to reduce fraud and counterfeiting to negligible amounts, right? Like, doesn't that make sense?
It does, and also gives the potential purchaser just lots more information so they can make an informed decision, and it'll be based on more details than just, what the label looks like or the, the shoulder level, things of that nature.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right. And I think the more data, the more transparency, the more information, the better for the consumer. Yeah. Any other questions about provenance? And by the way, I forgot to say, if anybody has any questions in the audience, please feel free to ask questions. Retroactive utility. I see Chris asked a question about retroactive utility. So here's how we're looking at it. I think the tasting tokens are really interesting in two pieces. One is I love the idea of the time capsule, right? You're opening it up and the winemaker's talking to you from 15 years ago. Actually, I'm going to share. I've got one other, like, this hasn't been created yet. It's just kind of a fun little tasting token that we did, but I'll share. I'll play it for you. So.
I'm not able to hear the audio, but I see it playing.
Oh, I didn't put, so the audio didn't come through. All right, well, sorry about that. But what you, I still need to figure out Zoom. Sorry, I'm a bit of a Zoom neophyte. But what you would have heard is the winemaker telling a story about the wine, right? So for that, 15-second piece, and imagine being able to see that, 15 years from now, and not just talking about the wine, talking about the climate that year, talking about that specific vintage and what that resulted in. So that part I think is really, really interesting. But from a utility standpoint, it's for the first time the winemaker is kind of put in touch with the consumer at the moment of consumption, right? Because it's a tasting token, you're only minting it right when you open the bottle, right when you're tasting the bottle. So it creates this really interesting way for the winemaker to be in touch with the consumer. And we think in the beginning that can be just as easy as, we're honored that you opened our wine on your 15th wedding anniversary. Congratulations. And I hope it's showing well, right? But over time, that can be, hey, if you collect 5 tasting tokens, then we want to invite you to a winemaker dinner the next time the winemaker's in town. And if you collect 10, then we want to invite you to the winery for a vertical tasting. And there's really no limit to the kind of utility that can be introduced by the winemaker or by us or by, some combination of that. I mean, we're thinking about, we've got a bunch of ideas for utilities, airdrops of art, the ability to buy or to get your hands on some exclusive merchandise, events, travel, tastings. There's all, and obviously, the drops, right? So imagine a winery being able to identify all their best customers, not necessarily the best buyers, but the actual consumers that are drinking their wine, and being able to offer those consumers an allocation. Like, that starts to get, I think, really, really interesting. And whether it's an allocation of futures or a present allocation or an allocation of or something out of the library, like the opportunity for the winery to incentivize and reward consumption, to build community around their best consumers, and to be in contact with them. I think that's I think that's going to be really interesting, and it's for me it feels like a game changing piece of technology, which is why I'm so excited about it.
Yeah. So do you anticipate that there would be an opportunity then for individuals to purchase and get allocations directly or ex chateau in some
I,
instances?
I think so. I mean, look, there's going to be political problems with that everywhere. We're and that's the kind of thing that we're talking about now. There are a lot of wineries that are already doing shadow allocations, where it's they're doing it either through a shadow negociant, or they're doing it through a private sale, or there's a couple of different ways that they're doing it. One of the reasons that we launched Club dVIN is it's sort of it's more we can work with wineries and they can make offers to our members, and it's more like a private sale and less like a public offering to direct to consumer, and that's more palatable to the negociants. So I think so. That's certainly something that a lot of the wineries that we have talked to have mentioned to us and are interested in figuring out a way to do. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but I know that that even the most prestigious wineries in France are looking for ways to not necessarily make more money, although that's always nice, but they know that the next generation of wine consumers want to have experiences. They want to have a direct connection, especially with the high-end brands that they're interacting with or that they're purchasing from. And they're looking to figure out what that's going to be. And I think what we're providing is the platform where that next generation of wine consumers is going to come from. Sorry if that was a long-winded answer to a simple question.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea, and it's actually a brilliant approach, because certainly you've seen how receptive consumers have been to things like the 19 Crimes wines, where you have Snoop Dogg talking through a QR code, or Martha Stewart, things of that nature. But I wouldn't imagine that sort of approach would be appropriate for some of the higher end wines, but this is definitely something that would have the same type of appeal to a consumer who's interested in these products. And I can see that being certainly very well received, especially among the younger demographic.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that the next generation of wine consumers are, well, and here's what's interesting. So, wineries have been, for 1,000 years, marketing challenged, especially, boutique wineries or low production wineries, low intervention wineries. Like, your big brands, they figure out a way to do kind of mass marketing, but the smaller ones, like, it's hard for them to get their brand out there, and it's hard for them to tell their story, especially when the only place they have to do it is in a like 3 by 4 inch piece of paper that sits on the front of the bottle. It's a very, very small amount of real estate for them to be able to tell their story or talk about their brand. And what this provides is kind of a way for them to do that. They can tell their story with the digital cork. They can tell their story not just to the person who's collecting, but also to the people who that person is sharing it with. Because up until today, the winery would they'd put everything that they could on those 2 little labels, and they'd send it to you, and then you would just store that wine like in a cellar someplace, right, where no one can see it. Well, now with a virtual cellar, even if it's just an Instagram, if it's an Instagram gallery, all of a sudden now that brand can show off, can tell their story, and then you can, in the same way that individuals for a long time self-identify with, a sneaker brand or a watch or a car, like, they can self-identify for really the first time with their wine brands, and show off those brands, and the brands can use that as an opportunity to tell their story. And that's a new and interesting way, I think, for even these high-end wine brands to be able to talk to their audience or talk to their consumers in a way that they just haven't been able to before. I can't tell you how many winemakers I know that have spent tens of thousands of dollars on a piece of video that's sitting in their YouTube account with 7 views. Every winemaker I know has that. And this really, I think, provides a way for them to get their message out there, to tell their story and get it out there to more people. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. And especially because this way they know it's going to be someone who's interested in the product. So
Sure.
where if they do other things, then, pretty much just a small percentage of the people they're trying to reach would get access to it. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Cool. And I really like the sharing aspect. Like, we need to work more on it. We need to kind of get it to look better and feel better. But we're in very early stages, so there's a lot for us to do. We need to build in some privacy protections so that people can make sure that they're only sharing what they want with who they want. But I really think that the utility and just the way that this is built, it provides for just so many opportunities in the future, both for collectors and for the wineries.
Yeah, no, I very much agree.
So I'm going to ask one other question. So Chris is asking, will you be offering your own wallet? So we've partnered with a company called Taurus that makes a very lightweight wallet that we partnered with, and you can use the Taurus wallet to create your account on Club dVIN. It's Club dVIN branded, but it's built on Taurus. That said, I just want to be really clear about wallets and about that wallet. We call it actually more like a money clip than a wallet. It's something that it's great for tasting tokens, because tasting tokens are non-transferable. And it's very, very, they really don't have any value other than that utility and that proof of experience. You can't sell them, you can't trade them. But we think that kind of the next step up, and what we are kind of advising people to do, if you want to have a wallet that you're storing, a little bit of Ethereum or block or Bitcoin or something more than just your tasting tokens, then you might want to get a MetaMask wallet. We've worked a lot with them, and that's our platform works perfectly with MetaMask. And then obviously, if you have a lot of assets in your wallet, you might want to consider getting a ledger or another kind of wallet that's actually a cold wallet. When you disconnect it from your computer, it's cold and unhackable and unalterable. So that's kind of what we would assume. So we're partnering to create a wallet that people can use for tasting tokens, but you really don't want to put more than tasting tokens or just some simple things in there. Any other questions from the crowd? If not, I think we're over time, didn't we? I only asked you for 45 minutes, John. So I appreciate the time. If you have any other questions for me or anything else that you think that the folks would be interested in hearing about, a lot more about the project. We're going to have more of these webinars. We have another one on Wednesday and then one on Friday with the co-founders. So if there's anything else that you think that I should bring up, I'm happy to talk about it now, or we can send people to the co-founders on Friday.
Sure. I actually did have a question from someone on Twitter that I promised to ask. So
sure.
This person was actually concerned about some of the environmental impact. I know there's been articles about, Bitcoin and how it uses, mining Bitcoin uses up more energy than the country of Norway, for example. So what are your thoughts regarding the environmental impact and ways to potentially reduce that going forward?
So when we started this, we we were environmentally friendly first. We thought of the eco challenge before anything else. And so we've settled in on the Polygon blockchain, which is a different blockchain from the blockchain that Bitcoin is on. And it works in a different way. So Bitcoin and Ethereum are both proof of work chains. And a proof of work chain just means that your computer, in order for the server to update the blockchain, the server has to do a bunch of work in order to, and provide proof of that work in order to be able to update the chain. And I'm probably getting a lot of this wrong, and I'm sure that my tech folks are going to yell at me after this. But the Polygon chain is a proof of stake. And proof of stake just means that instead of having to do a bunch of work on your computer, you just have to show that you own enough of a certain coin or own enough of a certain asset in order to say, I have the ability to, along with a bunch of other people, to say yes and update the blockchain. I know that all sounds a little bit weird. It's more of a security thing than anything else, right? Like, you need to have consensus among a certain number of computers in order to update the chain. So the difference between proof of work and proof of stake is actually huge. So proof of stake or proof of work for blockchain, I think that the average transaction right now costs about $100 in energy, which is pretty expensive. So updating the blockchain, it's pretty expensive. For Polygon, what we do is when you open an account on Club dVIN and we make your Polygon wallet, we put $1 worth of Polygons. It's called Matic. That's the coin that makes Polygon work. Every time we mint you a new tasting token, it costs less than a cent. I think it's like a half a cent or a quarter of a cent to make you a new NFT, a tasting token. So we think $100 is probably going to last a couple of years or more of minting tasting tokens. So that's really the difference. I mean, it's $100 worth of energy for Bitcoin, and compared to that, we're at I think a half a cent to make an NFT on Polygon. Now it's not 100% carbon neutral yet, but Polygon has committed to becoming carbon neutral by the end of the year. And as soon as they're carbon neutral, I think we're all gonna feel really good about using that blockchain. Right now, it uses kind of less, a lot. In fact, we should have someone do the research on this. I think it probably uses less energy than maybe uses less than posting a video to Instagram, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out about that. It's going to be pretty close. The truth is, it's very, very inexpensive.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Sure. Any other questions from anybody? We got the Q&A is open. And if you want to raise your hand, we're happy to have you step on stage and ask a question. So thanks for the polls. We appreciate you, everybody, letting us know a little bit more about you. It's helpful for us as we figure out how we're going to move forward. I think that's probably it for us, John. Unless you have anything that you want to add.
No, I think that was it. Thanks very much for the opportunity. Very much enjoyed speaking with you today.
Well, thank you, and looking forward to seeing you when you come to Spain. Looking forward to having a glass of wine in person, and thank you very much for not only for appearing today and helping us to kind of walk through how social media and the blockchain and collectible wines are gonna work together, but also for being a founding member and kind of helping us as we shape and chart our path forward through this sort of fun and interesting and wild world of NFTs and wine.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And thanks very much for the opportunity, and very excited about it.
All right. Well, thanks, John. And thanks everybody for showing up. Really appreciate it. All right. Take care.